Right, welcome back. Of course, we have been following President Cyril Ramaphosa testifying at the Commission of Inquiry into state capture. Of course, the Commission has now adjourning at 4 p.m. and we're going to discuss what was said today, what came out of the Commission the entire day today. And of course, we talked to our politics editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, who is there outside for us in Bloemfontein. Mzwa, very good afternoon to you. Of course, you have been following throughout the day what the president has had to say, and one of the things as I was following, I thought to myself, where does one start? And I think as our politics editor, you're best placed to answer that question. Is there a feeling that there were certain concessions that were made today, or is there a sense that it was a kind of passing the buck this afternoon?
Well, a very good afternoon to you, Flo. It's been a very interesting evidence that has been given, really, by the president of the ANC. But to be quite honest with you, there hasn't been anything fresh or new that has emerged in terms of giving the Commission new information, because the Commission appears to have been more interested in how the cadre deployment, how the party conducts its business when it deploys certain individuals into certain positions. So we spent the better part of today dealing with the issue of cadre deployment. Of course, the president of the ANC, Flo, defended it. Nevertheless, he did say, well, there are some weaknesses here and there, but each and every party that wins election wants to push its program, and of course you can do that with the people that you know. In fact, he went as far as invoking what the former Prime Minister of UK, Margaret Thatcher, did back then when she said, if you are not one of us, so you certainly should not come in. So that is what was essential today, Flo. It was mainly about cadre deployment. And you'd remember that before the Commission started with the questions, he basically requested to make a statement where he reaffirmed the support for the Commission by the governing party, where he said they are opposed to all forms of corruption, so they are supporting the state capture because, in his view, this is the start, or this is the renewal process. They are cleansing themselves. As he was concluding now, Flo, then the issues which I think many people have been looking forward to, the issues of Bosasa. Bosasa, it's well documented that it's been funding the ANC. And then when the president was asked about that, he said, you know what, it did happen, but clearly, given that it's been involved in a number of activities that perhaps are now known to have been wrong, so obviously he had no idea how it had happened. So it's concluded the evidence now, but he will pick up tomorrow, and then you'd know that this session today and tomorrow is dedicated to party issues. Time and again, the issues of state will come in, but it's primarily about the party. So yeah, that's where we are, Flo, the issues of state capture, and then the president saying the ANC supports the issue of the Commission, and of course, going forward, they want to correct all that has happened. Flo?
I'd like to pick up where you kind of started when you were talking about the issue of cadre deployment, which, you know, we heard from the president about. He spoke about the fact that, there were people who were put in positions where they shouldn't have been in those positions. Also mentioning the fact that, you know, there were people put in positions that were not fit for purpose. If I can just kind of quote him there. The question then is, you know, at the end of the day, he was a deputy president at the time, and he can't necessarily remove himself from any of those decisions that had been made at the time. Was there a sense this afternoon that the president was, in a way, removing himself from what he himself termed as having been that cadre deployment within the ANC?
Well, not necessarily, Flo, when it comes to the deployment committee, because he had to explain to the commission what a deployment committee is, how it functions, what it entails. But then on some of the appointments, because the commission basically said, when you look at some of the SOEs, there appeared to be a certain trend or a certain thread in the appointment of certain individuals. So there he basically said there is a weakness, and in fact saying even the deployment committee flow is not really an authoritative body, but it's more of a recommendation committee. He made an example that sometimes the deployment committee would recommend individuals, but they would not be appointed because, in his view, it's more of a recommendation committee. So what does that mean then? It means there are appointments which are done completely outside of the deployment committee. Perhaps most of those which are in question could be categorized to fall into that one where they were certainly not involved. He actually made an example about himself. He said he made one appointment without consulting with his top six, without even consulting with the chairperson of the deployment committee, the current Deputy President David Mabuza. And then he said, upon him informing him, so he realized that he had made a mistake. And of course, he called him and he called the Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, to say, well, I had gone ahead and made this appointment, but I should have consulted you. So they called him to Lutil House to try and explain what had happened. But of course, they resolved that issue. The reason he was mentioning that particular issue flow was to say, as much as the deployment committee does have obviously the powers to recommend certain individuals, it does not mean those people will be appointed. And in fact, his example was trying to say even he has done appointments without involving the deployment committee. So what does that mean? It means many of those appointments that are in question now were done outside of the deployment committee. That is the thrust of what he was saying.
Yeah. Mzwa, let's say I gave you the responsibility of putting together a front page headline based on today's, the president testifying today at the commission. What would that headline read? What was the biggest thing that came out of today if you were to actually just bring it to one-liner?
It's very simple for me, Flo. I know the president has been saying so many things, but if you look at everything that he's been saying, he's basically defended the cadre deployment. That is the headline.
All right, very interesting indeed, Mzwa. We'll catch up with you, obviously, of course, tomorrow sharp at 9 a.m. If you can just take us through what to expect as we wrap up our conversation, what to expect then tomorrow morning. Of course, we did leave off on dealings with Bosasa and, of course, the contracts with government that Bosasa had. We're going to continue, obviously, with that tomorrow, but what more are we set to be discussing tomorrow? What is the president expected to be testifying about tomorrow morning?
It's basically that the issues around Bosasa, so those companies that are having contracts with the ANC, because they are dealing with the issues now of funding, and which you heard he's been basically saying with the Political Party Funding Act coming into effect, so it's been a savior. So we will continue from there. And of course, there are many other issues really that have arisen. Perhaps you may even hear about the issues around those who had complained that some of the appointments were made by outsiders and then the NEC couldn't do much about. And then you can hear about some of the decisions really that were said to have been made outside of the collective. And then the question that Judge Zondo would want to know is, if a particular decision was made without the NEC, where were you? What did you do about it? That's what we expect to happen tomorrow.
All right, Mzwa, many thanks to you. You've had a long day indeed.